Hello everybody. I hope you guys are having a good day today. Just want to make a short video about something I've been studying for the past couple of months now. And it's about King Solomon. Many of you know the story of King Solomon, who was known for his wisdom and who was known as a wise king. People traveled from afar just to witness the wisdom that Solomon possessed. This is what the Bible says about him. But the Bible also talks about King Solomon having 700 wives. When I was younger, I was taught not to question things, take everything as it is for face value. But as I got older, I learned about wisdom. And true wisdom is discernment. True wisdom is perception. So, after gaining the insight of wisdom, I decided I wanted to know who these 700 women were that the Bible never emphasized on. Because this story is told throughout the ages. King Solomon had 700 wives. So, I did on my own. I searched on Google. How many wives did King Solomon have? This is what I got. 1. I searched on Google for months trying to figure out who these 700 women were, and nothing came up. There is no account for the 700 women, and there is nothing that states who these 700 women were. It only talked about one woman. And we're going to talk about who this woman is first, but I want to also get into this truth of King Solomon's real wife. So in the Bible, they say this was King Solomon's wife. We're going to talk about her background. She was an Ammonite, and as such, one of only 2 of all the queen mothers of Israel or Judah who was a foreigner. Now, if many of you don't know the story of the Ammonites, they were known as women who set men up to take their fortunes. They're known as the women who kill kings so they can inherit everything that the king has to offer. So this is the background of the woman that they said he was married to, an Ammonite. Many of you know the story of King Solomon in Songs of Songs. Those are 2 different women. In Songs of Songs, King Solomon is professing his love to a woman who's also known as the daughter of Zion. The one who they mention, I am dark, yet I am comely, who I have touched in other videos, also known as Queen Sheba. But in Songs of Songs, they're talking about 2 different women. Not this woman, not an Ammonite. We know he was not talking about this woman. But not only was he not talking about this woman, Google says this was the only woman he was married to. The Bible says 700 wives and Google says 1. So that's why we're going to talk about why it's important to have wisdom. Wisdom, discernment, insight, perception. Because when you have true wisdom, you have the ability to reach intelligent conclusions. True wisdom would have you thinking, okay, 700 wives in a time where it's no birth control, no vasectomies. You had 700 wives, you only had 1 child. 700 wives in a time where there was no such thing as birth control or vasectomies, you only have 1 child. Now, this is what 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 41 says about King Solomon. Everything else that Solomon did, his career, his wisdom, are all recorded in the history of Solomon. He was king in Jerusalem over all Israel for 40 years, and he died and was buried in David's city. There's nowhere in the Bible where you find the history of Solomon, which is also called the Acts of Solomon. And this is what it says about it. And the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did in his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the Acts of Solomon? Do any of you know what the book of the Acts of Solomon is? It's called the Wisdom of Solomon. I included that in the previous video. I suggest you listen to it. The Wisdom of Solomon is not included in the Bible because the Bible doesn't talk about Solomon's wisdom. They try to associate Solomon more with the 700 wives theory, and they do not go into details about the actual wisdom that Solomon had. But that's why it's so important for you to have wisdom. Like we said, these are the synonyms for wisdom: discernment, insight, perception, sense, common sense, judgment. Wisdom means the ability to reach intelligent conclusions. An intelligent conclusion is if they have no actual evidence of these 700 wives King Solomon had, and there is no actual proof of the names of these 700 women, then wisdom will show you that that's not true. If any of you can come up with these 700 women that King Solomon were married to, put it out there, because I would like to see it. I want to know it. I have yet to come across it, and if I have yet to come across it and it's not been produced yet, then maybe it's not true. I think this topic is so important when you're discerning wisdom, because when you have true wisdom, you'll be able to discern what's true and what's false based on factual evidence and intelligent conclusions. In order for you to understand the actual truth, you have to be presented with the actual truth. And in order for you to understand who wisdom is, you have to know exactly who wisdom is. I think the Bible, and I think a lot of people that wrote the Bible, they wanted to cover up this feminine characteristic, this feminine divinity. They wanted to cover up wisdom. And I think that's why the whole 700 wife theory came to be. They wanted to take away from the wisdom. They didn't want you to remember Solomon for his wisdom. They wanted you to remember Solomon for his 700 wives. You got to think about it. When somebody asks, if you ask somebody, do you know about King Solomon? The first thing they'll say is, oh yeah, the king with 700 wives. They won't say, oh, the king that was filled with wisdom. I think that's why they included this whole 700 wife theory, to take away from the wisdom so people wouldn't go into, trying to search out what wisdom he really had. And many of you know the whole theme throughout the Bible is knowledge is wrong and knowledge is bad. But in this case, knowledge is discernment. Because when you have true knowledge of King Solomon and you have true knowledge of wisdom, then you'll be able to discern, okay, wait a minute. 700 wives in a time where there was no birth control and they haven't produced any names with these women. Like, listen, it's not rocket science. It's just actually sitting down and reading things and being able to discern. And that's an important word. I hear so many people mention discernment. Wisdom is discernment. Please be able to discern the truth from a fiction, and not only that, be able to go into details about these people's lives. Many of you only know Solomon for his 700 wives, but if you actually read the wisdom of Solomon, you'll know him for the wisdom that he possessed. Thank you, guys.